We always step into a new year with a quiet hope that life will gradually get better over time. We wait for some invisible miracle to wash away our exhaustion, heal old wounds, and open a brighter path ahead. But Machiavelli, with a bluntness that could feel almost ruthless, never believed in such miracles. He said that life does not change just because we wish it to change. It only transforms when we gather enough courage to face the silent force steering us from within, the part of ourselves we never want to look at. For Machiavelli, most of our choices are repeated mistakes, and the cycles we cannot escape do not come from circumstance. They come from what we avoid in our own inner darkness, yet casually label as fate. But no, those are simply the unconscious repeating the lesson we were never brave enough to learn. Which is why 2026 will not magically become the happiest year of your life. Happiness through Machiavelli's lens is not a pleasant feeling. It is the moment you live in alignment with your true nature when the shadow, intuition, and reason no longer fight each other in silence. And if you believe you fully understand yourself, wait until you come face to face with the part you've buried the deepest. That moment may crack you open, but it may also reveal the doorway to the version of yourself you have been searching for your entire life. So the real question isn't, will 2026 be good to you? The real question is, are you ready to meet yourself again so you can make 2026 the happiest year of your life? Step 1. You must dare to face your shadow. Number 1. What is the shadow? When Machiavelli speaks of the shadow, he is not talking about evil in a moral sense. He is talking about the rejected parts, the anger you suppress for fear of being seen as impolite, the envy you cover with a polite smile, the need to be loved that you call troublesome, the weakness you pretend never existed. Everything you consider inappropriate for your ideal self-image is thrown into the darkness. The shadow is the human part you always carry with you even when you believe it has disappeared. Machiavelli called it, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. But what is more frightening is that the more you try to hide it, the more alive it becomes. And it patiently waits for your weakest moments to rise. Have you ever felt inexplicably irritated with someone simply because they do exactly what you dare not do? For example, you feel uneasy with someone who always speaks their true opinion while you choose silence for fear of judgment. Why does that bother you so much? Because they are living the part you have bound within yourself. The shadow is not your enemy. It is you, but the version you have tried to disown for years. And people always fear the familiar, yet forgotten more than anything strange. Machiavelli once said that the shadow is the foundation upon which the mature ego must stand. That means if you do not recognize your dark side, you will forever live a life on loose ground, trying to maintain a beautiful image by pushing everything unattractive to the bottom. But the bottom of the soul is not a place for garbage. It is a place for energy you do not yet know how to use. When you push too much down there, the pressure becomes great enough to break the surface. And then you will wonder, why did I overreact like that? Why did I do something I thought I was incapable of? The answer always lies in the shadow. Consider a familiar example. You feel insulted when someone critiques your work even though they only offer mild suggestions. You react more strongly than necessary, but the cause is not in their words. It lies in the wound of fearing you are not good enough, not valuable enough. The shadow often hides behind exaggerated reactions. When you notice yourself overreacting, that is precisely when the shadow is trying to say something. Look at me. I have never disappeared. And if any moment or memory within you has just stirred slightly while reading this, leave a small mark in the comments below as a way of whispering to yourself, I too am beginning to recognize my shadow. The shadow does not contain only negative things, it also holds potential. Those who always consider themselves weak often hide great strength. Those who find it hard to trust others often hide a need for connection so strong that they themselves fear it. The shadow is always created from two extremes, the pot you fear and the pot you crave, but the moment you hide it away, you lose the hidden power within. We often think the shadow will lie dormant if we do not touch it. But the moment we turn our back is when it begins to control us most strongly. When you do not face your dark side, you merely let it operate in the darkness, uncontrolled, undirected, and increasingly dominating your life in ways you do not notice. From here, consequences begin to appear, silent but persistent like black threads woven into every choice you make. The clearest consequence is the feeling of repetition. You realize you keep stepping into familiar stories, the same type of partner, the same type of hurt, the same way of reacting. Everything forms a closed circle. It is not because you are unlucky or choose the wrong people, but because the unseen shadow keeps pulling you back into situations that allow it to manifest. When not confronted, the shadow also causes overreactions. You think you are just feeling annoyed, but in reality, the psyche is sounding an alarm about something you refuse to acknowledge. You erupt in fierce anger when someone points out your weakness, not because their words are too harsh, but because they touch exactly the part you have long denied. You envy others' freedom because you are the one who has long imprisoned in safety. A more subtle consequence is self-sabotage. This is what Machiavelli called the rebellion of the unconscious. You want to step through a new door, but right before the handle, an invisible force pulls you back to the familiar. You want to be loved, but push others away. You crave opportunity, but ruin it just before grasping it. The shadow always pulls you toward what it knows, even if it is painful. Because for the unconscious, familiar pain is safer than unfamiliar happiness. Living long with an unacknowledged shadow also drains your energy. Not the tiredness from work, but a deep inner exhaustion. You feel heavy even when nothing serious has happened. You find yourself without inspiration, without vitality, as if living a life not true to your real self. Machiavelli called this the suffocation of the soul. When the ego must repress too many natural parts of itself to the bottom, it expends enormous energy maintaining the outer mask. An unacknowledged shadow also distorts your view of the world. You do not see others as they are but through the lens of your own projections. You see someone as arrogant because you dare not express your own worth. You judge others as selfish because you dare not voice your own needs. You call someone too sensitive only because you have grown numb to what is inside you. And you conclude that life is unfair while it is your unconscious that is coloring everything. But the greatest consequence is that you lose the chance to become a whole person. Machiavelli believed that each person carries within them untapped potentials, strengths yet untouched, qualities suppressed only because they do not fit the beautiful image you have built. When you do not face the shadow, you do not merely bury the dark part. You bury your greatest strengths as well. The assertiveness you dismiss as hot, temperedness may be a source of courage, the sensitivity you hide may be profound intuition, the stubbornness you see as bad may be steadfast will. Within the shadow always lies the seed of what you are seeking, and at some point you will realize not facing the shadow does not make you safer. It makes you live a constricted life guided by motives you do not understand. When you refuse to see yourself, life will force you to repeat the pain until you finally stop. But remember, Machiavelli never said you must destroy it. The shadow is like a child locked too long in a dark room. Once recognized, it becomes less aggressive. Once listened to, it stops sabotaging. When the light of awareness is brought into the shadow, you do not merely weaken it. You transform it into strength. When you understand the shadow, you understand that you are not irrational. You are merely being controlled by the part you have never dared to meet. And when you dare to look it straight in the eye, you can begin the first true dialogue with yourself. A dialogue that many people avoid their entire lives. Number 2, practical exercises. Dialoguing with the shadow is not a mystical ritual nor a distant spiritual exercise. It is a very human act sitting down, opening the door you have locked for years, and letting the forgotten part of yourself step into the light. Working with the shadow requires honesty and, more importantly, patience. This journey is not easy, but it is very practical if you know where to begin. The first practice is to observe your strong reactions in daily life. When you overreact, simply pause and ask yourself, what is this reaction saying about me? Machiavelli said, "The shadow always hides in what we condemn, hate, or avoid." So instead of blaming circumstances, see what that emotion is protecting inside you. The next practice is to write a dialogue with the shadow. Spend 10 to 15 minutes each day. Take paper and pen and write down the questions you want to ask your dark side. Write as if speaking to a real person. Then let your hand write the answers without control, without editing, without judgment. You will be surprised to find that voice both blunt and wounded, yet instinctively wise. Writing helps separate the shadow from the ego, allowing you to see it more clearly as an independent part needing to be heard. The answers may not be pretty, but they are true, and truth is always the starting point of healing. The next practice is to become familiar with discomfort. As you begin dialoguing with the shadow, it will bring up truths you have avoided for years. You will feel confused, even ashamed. But instead of pushing it away, try sitting with that feeling for a few minutes. Breathe, observe it, and let it exist without trying to fix it. Discomfort is the signal that you are touching the unconscious realm. Machiavelli believed any emotion fully observed loses its power to dominate you. The more accustomed you become to staying with difficult feelings, the gentler and less aggressive the shadow becomes. A deeper practice for those truly willing to step into the territory where consciousness and unconscious meet is active imagination. This is the technique Machiavelli regarded as the bridge connecting you to the living symbols, voices, and images within. It is an intentional encounter between you and the unconscious part waiting to speak. The method is simple yet requires courage. Sit down, breathe slowly, and bring the mind to a relaxed state as before entering a dream. Then call your shadow to appear. You may see a figure, a dark silhouette, an angry child, or merely a vague sensation. Do not force it to look a certain way. The shadow will appear in the form your mind can most accept. When that image emerges, your task is not to judge or analyze. Simply ask, "Who are you? What do you want from me?" Let the shadow respond through images, words, or emotions. Active imagination is not about creating a story. It is about letting the story emerge on its own. The unconscious does not speak in logic, but it is profoundly truthful. You may hear answers you did not expect, yet they are often so accurate that they leave you speechless. Finally, create a space in your life for dialogue with yourself. That space can be a corner of a table, a notebook, a few minutes before sleep, or a quiet morning. The shadow does not appear in noise. It appears when you are still enough to hear what you usually scroll past. Dialoguing with the shadow does not make you darker. It makes you truly yourself, and then you no longer live as a copy trying to please the world. You begin to live as a person with depth, with autonomy, with identity. That is the foundation of any lasting change. Step 2. Stop living through the mask. And as you begin returning to yourself more deeply, you will notice something else. We don't only avoid our darkness. Sometimes we even avoid our own light, hiding it beneath roles we have worn for far too long. Number 1. Persona, the social mask. The persona is the mask you wear every day to be accepted, to fit in, to survive in this world. Machiavelli called it the face turned towards society. The part of you that filters out everything you believe others won't like, keeping only the traits most likely to be praised. It isn't inherently bad. In truth, no one can participate in society without some form of persona. The problem begins only when you forget that it is a mask, not your real self. From childhood, you learn to adjust yourself to belong. Over time, the persona became a kind of armor you mistook for your own skin. You live not to be judged, not to make mistakes, not to disappoint, but the price you pay is this: you gradually forget who you actually are. A familiar example. In the workplace, you are the steady one, confident, calm, and reliable. But inside you are filled with anxiety and fear of being wrong. You cling to the image of the dependable one. So you swallow your no. Take on more responsibility, even when you are exhausted. Everything seems to function smoothly until one day you walk into a room and suddenly feel as though you cannot breathe. That is the sign of a persona stretched past its limits. The more perfect the mask, the greater the risk of collapse behind it. Machiavelli said, "The persona is like a garment you choose when stepping into the world. But if you fall asleep inside it, you lose the ability to feel your own skin. The more you identify with the persona, the more likely you are to feel empty. Because when you live to satisfy external expectations, you must sacrifice internal needs. You smile when you want to cry. You nod when you want to refuse. You act strong when what you truly want is to lean on someone. Slowly your body tires, your mind dims, and your soul shrinks like a room where the light has gone out. Living too long inside the persona makes you irritated with yourself without knowing why. Life feels dull even though nothing is wrong. You feel distant from those next to you even while sharing laughter. This is what Machiavelli called estrangement from the self. When the persona becomes too large, you can no longer hear your true voice. You only hear the noise of expectations, obligations, and roles. The persona is necessary. It protects you. It helps you function in a world full of rules. But the persona must be placed in the right position outside you, not inside. When you understand that the mask is meant to be used, not lived in, you stop letting it dictate how you must exist. Maturity arrives when you know when to remove it. You can step into society with a solid persona, yet return to yourself without feeling strained. You can play the role you need to play without losing the soul behind performance. And the most important question Machiavelli wanted you to ask is, who am I when the spotlight disappears? If that question unsettles you, it is a sign the persona has covered your authentic core. But confusion is not failure. It is an invitation to begin the journey back to the person behind the mask, the one who has waited far too long to be seen. Number 2. Signs that the persona is consuming you. When the mask becomes too familiar, you no longer know where the role ends and where you begin. And this is when the next chapter unfolds. The signs that your persona has begun to swallow you. You know the persona is in control. When your emotions no longer belong to you, you smile because you should, not because you're happy. You say you're fine because it's the right answer, not because you truly are. You act strong even as your inner world trembles. Everything you do unfolds smoothly like a memorized script. But the truth is, you feel nothing. This disconnection is the sign that you're living by reflex, not by heart. Machiavelli called this state a temporary loss of soul, where a person continues functioning outwardly, but has become hollow inside. Another subtler sign: you feel tired without knowing why. Not tired from work or responsibility, but exhausted from carrying an identity that isn't yours. Imagine holding up a heavy mask on your face all day. At some point, the body whispers, "I can't do this anymore." That's why you feel suffocated during meetings, sad in the middle of gatherings, or drained even when nothing significant has happened. The body knows the persona is taking up too much space, and it calls for help. Another sign is that you no longer know what you want. When the persona dominates, you live according to expectations. Families, works, societies. You choose what you should do instead of what you want. You may look successful to everyone else yet feel empty within your own life. This happens because the persona has no dreams of its own. It only reenacts the dreams others impose on you. When you lose the ability to hear your inner calling, that is the sign that the persona is steering your entire path. One of the most painful signs is the feeling of loneliness. Even in a crowd, you are liked, praised, seen as approachable, but you feel that no one truly knows you. No one touches the deepest part of you, not because they don't want to, but because you don't dare let them see it. You unconsciously hold up the persona like a thick pane of glass. When people touch the glass, you mistake it for them touching you, but you know it isn't real, and that loneliness isn't the absence of others. It is the absence of yourself in your own life. And perhaps the clearest sign, as Machiavelli described, is that you no longer know your limits. You take on more than you can bear. You smile more than your heart can hold. You create a good person version of yourself so perfect that even you are exhausted trying to keep up with it. When the persona becomes too strong, you no longer know whether you're doing something because you truly want it, or because you're afraid of losing the image you've built. Everything becomes an obligation, not a choice. A follower once shared that everyone around them always came To them, whenever trouble arose, they became the strong one of the group, always knowing what to do, always appearing fine. But when they were the ones hurting, they couldn't open up to anyone. Partly because they felt their friends weren't good enough listeners, but mostly because they feared that even a moment of vulnerability would collapse the strong image they had maintained. And that was when they realized the mask had buried their need to lean on someone like a real human being. And if at any moment in these lines you suddenly glance inward, pause and ask yourself how many of these signs carry the shape of my own life. When you're ready, leave a small reflection below to mark that you've begun to recognize what has been wearing down your spirit. The persona does not consume you in a day. It takes hold bit by bit. Every time you say it's fine when it hurts. Every time you strive for perfection so no one criticizes you. Every time you remain silent just to keep the peace, and then one day you no longer recognize yourself. Recognizing these signs is not meant to make you blame yourself. It is the first step toward reclaiming the part of you that has been lost. Only when you see how the persona dominates you can you begin removing the mask and returning to your true self. Number 3. Practical steps for 2026. Once you recognize the signs that your persona is consuming you, the next step is learning how to remove the mask safely and consciously. And this is what Machiavelli always emphasized. You don't need to destroy the persona. You simply need to put it back in its rightful place. Only then can you step into 2026 as your authentic self, not as the role you've been performing for years. The first practice is speaking truth in small moments. Persona grows through the countless times you say what others want to hear, so you must dismantle it through small acts of honesty. When someone asks if you're okay, try answering according to how you actually feel, even just a little. When you disagree with a request, try saying, "I'm not ready for that." When you're tired, try stopping instead of pushing through. The second practice is observing your root emotions instead of reacting from habit. When you're about to say it's fine, pause and ask, "What am I really feeling?" When you're about to agree just to maintain harmony, ask, "Do I want this, or am I trying to protect an image?" This honesty is the lamp that lights the inner space where the persona has stood for too long. The more you observe, the more clearly you can distinguish real needs from the habit of pleasing others. The next practice is setting boundaries. People dominated by their persona often avoid saying no out of fear of disappointing, being misunderstood, and being judged. But boundaries are not selfish. They protect the true self from dissolving. Start with small boundaries, rest time, not accepting tasks you can't handle, and prioritizing what makes you feel alive. Each boundary is a step toward reclaiming authorship over your life. Another essential practice is finding a space where you don't need to perform. It might be a trusted friend, a group where you feel safe, or simply a journal where you can express everything unfiltered. Such spaces restore the feeling of being seen, understood. When you have a place to truly return to, the persona no longer has to work overtime in your everyday life. The next practice is reconnecting with what makes you feel like yourself. It sounds simple but is profoundly powerful. Walking alone without expectations, doing something you love without posting it online, allowing yourself a few unproductive hours, creating something not to show but to feel. When you live even one moment meant only for yourself, you nourish the deepest part of your soul. Finally, make a commitment for 2026. I will live a year in which my soul has a voice. Not through rebellion, but through honesty. Not by changing everything, but by no longer lying to yourself. Happiness through Machiavelli's perspective is not a fleeting joy. It is the harmony between the inner self and the outer self. When those two align, you no longer need to strive to be loved. You naturally become someone to whom love, opportunity, and peace are drawn. Step 3. Listening to the voice of the unconscious. It is in that silence that you begin to hear what the noise of daily life has long drowned out. The voice of the unconscious. This, according to Machiavelli, is where the deepest, wisest, and most honest part of the psyche resides. But the unconscious does not speak in words. It speaks in symbols, in fleeting intuitions, in those strange coincidences Machiavelli called synchronicity. Moments when the outer world mirrors precisely what you are carrying within. Meaningful coincidence is not magic. It is the meeting point between what you have not yet realized and what life sends you to awaken it. One of the clearest ways the unconscious speaks is through events that happen at uncannily perfect timing. You think of someone you haven't seen in years and they suddenly contact you. You are torn about an important decision, and that very day a sentence, an article, or a situation appears as if it were crafted exactly for you. This is not randomness. Synchronicity appears when your inner world and the outer world begin to speak the same language. Machiavelli believed that when your soul genuinely desires something, life begins sending signals to help you recognize the direction you must go. Think of a moment when you were stuck, ready to give up, and right at that point, something small yet perfectly timed happened. A conversation, an image, a reminder you did not search for. You felt as though the universe whispered, "Keep going." This is not superstition. It is the unconscious using external circumstances to express what you are not yet brave enough to acknowledge. Synchronicity often appears when you stand at a crossroads or when the deeper part of you is ready to transform, but your rational mind still hesitates. The unconscious also speaks through unexplainable feelings. You meet someone and instantly feel familiarity or caution even though you have never seen them before. You walk into a place and it feels strangely known. You sense clearly what you should do without having any logical evidence. While the rational mind relies on data, the unconscious draws from emotional memory, ancient instinct, and the intelligence of the entire psychic system you cannot see. These intuitions are your most primitive voice, the voice modern society has made you forget. Machiavelli once said, "Intuition is perception via the unconscious that brings forth ideas, images, new possibilities, and ways out of blocked situations." When you follow it, you connect with the ancient wisdom inside yourself. A young man once shared with me that he'd been contemplating quitting his job for months, but kept hesitating. One morning he unexpectedly ran into a former colleague, someone who had left the company for the same reason he was struggling with. The meeting wasn't planned, yet the colleague's words answered precisely what he had been agonizing over. That was not a coincidence. That was synchronicity. The outer world presenting the exact figure, the unconscious, wanted him to meet at the exact moment he was ready to hear the message. Synchronicity also appears through repeated symbols. It might be a number, an animal, a song, a phrase, something that shows up in several places during the same period of your life. The unconscious uses symbols because that is its native language. When something repeats so persistently that you cannot ignore it, don't rush to dismiss it as random. Ask, what is this symbol trying to tell me? Why is it appearing exactly when I'm struggling with this issue? When you ask the question, the unconscious continues sending clearer signals. It does not speak in complete sentences, but it guides you through fragments. Listening to the unconscious does not mean abandoning reason. It means you stop living with only half of yourself. When intuition and awareness work together, you become a more complete human being, someone who observes the world and also observes the self. Machiavelli called this the harmony of the inner and outer worlds, and that harmony creates the turning points many people call luck, but which are simply the results of living in alignment with the inner voice. To listen to your unconscious in 2026, begin with simple practices. Each day, spend a few minutes recording anything that catches your attention. Coincidences, repeated patterns, strong sensations you can't explain. Write them down without analyzing. After a few weeks, you'll notice a red thread weaving through these fragments. A coherent message your unconscious has been trying to send you. Next, allow yourself to trust your intuition in small decisions, not by leaping into recklessness, but by respecting that inner rightness in everyday choices. When you give the unconscious space to speak, it will begin speaking more clearly. You've walked with me through half this journey, and that has never been an easy thing. Not everyone has the patience to sit with the deepest parts of themselves, and even fewer dare to notice the delicate signals sent by the unconscious. If you are still here, something inside you has already begun to move. and I hope you will stay until the end because the next chapters may hold the very peace you've been searching for. As with all inner journeys, companionship makes it less lonely. If these reflections resonate with you, a like or a subscription not only helps the channel stay alive, but also reminds me that souls are walking this path alongside us. Stay here because the rest of this story holds even deeper and more beautiful truths waiting for you to open the door. Step 4. Entering the path of individuation. From these earlier steps, you arrive at the stage Machiavelli considered the ultimate purpose of human life, the journey of individuation. If the previous steps helped you remove the mask and face the darkness, individuation is the journey that goes further, the journey of becoming fully yourself, not the version the world expects nor the version you constructed to survive. This is not a comfortable path, but it is the only one that leads to the deepest peace. Individuation, according to Machiavelli, is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. A whole person is someone who dares to hold within themselves both light and shadow, both reason and instinct, both tenderness and quiet strength. They do not erase or glamorize any part. They reconcile, integrate, and give each part of themselves its rightful place. You cannot enter this journey if you are still clinging to the idea of who I should be. Individuation begins when you ask, who am I truly? When no one is watching, when I am not required to be anything. In the early stages, you may feel as though you're standing between two worlds. One is familiar, safe, stable, but empty. The other is uncertain, unclear, but echoing with a call you can feel deeply inside. Many people stop here because they fear losing what they already have. Recognition, roles, a sense of control. But Machiavelli believed you cannot find your true self in convenience. The path of individuation always begins with a fracture, a relationship falling apart, a job losing its meaning, a crisis that makes it impossible to keep living the old way. Individuation also requires overcoming the temptation to dissolve into the collective. Society prefers predictable people, but individuation makes you someone who no longer fits neatly into categories. You begin drifting away from groups that once felt comfortable. Old conversations feel constricting. Old habits no longer bring relief. This may make you think you're becoming different, but the truth is you're becoming yourself. A key point of this journey is learning to live with inner contradictions. Individuation does not eliminate contradiction. It teaches you that you can love and fear at the same time, long to move forward yet grieve what you leave behind, possess great potential yet still carry the limits of being human. A mature individual understands they are complex, and when you stop simplifying yourself just to make life easier, you begin to grow in the exact way your soul desires. In daily life, individuation appears through small but genuine choices, saying what you actually think, not what others expect. Resting when your body is tired, not when your schedule allows. Choosing what makes your soul brighten, not what earns approval. Each such choice is a step back toward the center of your being. Machiavelli believed every person has a unique path, and you only recognize it when you begin living from your inner truth. The journey of individuation may cause you to lose certain relationships, not because anyone is wrong, but because some relationships fit only the older version of you. Yet as you step into your real life, you will meet people who recognize you instantly because you are truly yourself. Machiavelli called this a meeting of souls. Ultimately, individuation has no clear end point. It is not a destination but a way of living. With each step, you become more aligned with your deepest nature. You gradually free yourself from unconscious forces, no longer pulled by your shadow, no longer shaped by society's expectations. You live in truth even when that truth is difficult. And that creates the kind of happiness Machiavelli considered the most enduring. The happiness that comes from the unity between who you feel yourself to be inside and who you show to the world. Happiness in Machiavelli's view does not fall from the sky like a gift. It arrives when you are brave enough to peel away each layer of disguise, face the forgotten corners within, and step out of the old life that only repeated familiar limitations. And when you walk this path, you realize you are not moving towards someone new. You are returning to the person you have always been but never allowed yourself to become. Thus 2026 is not a promise but a doorway. one that opens only when you touch it with absolute honesty. You will feel lost at times, tired at times, and unsure if you are on the right path. But the truth is the path of the soul never makes mistakes. It only waits for you to walk it with patience and a loyalty that refuses to betray your own heart. If there is one thing worth carrying into the new year, it is this: life does not give happiness to those who merely wait. It gives it to those who dare to step into themselves.